So, as a minority student, do you feel like you're living the American dream?
I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. I have a dream
that all men are created equal, and that the rights of every man are diminished when the rights of one man are threatened.
As former United States President Bill Clinton profoundly stated, the American dream will succeed or fail in the 21st century in direct proportion to our commitment to educate every person in the United States of America. School segregation, a mistake of the past that has stained the present.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Duncan. I'm a senior right now at Cheyenne with Cheyenne High School. I'm in basically everything philanthropy and youth, DECA, speech, track, cross country. It's fun and I like my life.
Do you think the American education system benefits all students?
Of course not. That sounds broad, but coming from Philadelphia, there's like a gigantic difference with my education I get here and the education I was given there. So no, even like reviewing over like my previous classmates, it's different. The materials that we learn and we have here is nowhere near my inner city school. The education level and what they expect from us is nowhere near my inner city school. And even the ACT and SCT, they're so drastically different. I had to take both of them this year, and just from moving back and forth, I could really see how my coming to North Dakota affected my SAT scores, and my being raised in Philadelphia affected my ACT scores. So it's completely different.
Does affirmative action compensate for the effects of classism and segregation in schools?
No. Affirmative action takes you only so far. But when you don't have the work and the effort, it kind of falls apart. It gives you the push you need, but it's not really supporting you. And I feel like we should focus more on making sure our kids are well equipped past just saying, oh, you have to put them in the school.
Do you believe that the American education system benefits all students?
Well, obviously, anytime you have a system, it is going to benefit some more than others. Education, just in a very generic sense, should benefit everyone. That does not mean that it is equitable to all people. The system is more equitable today than it has been in the past, but certainly there is a long way to go. We know that. We know what the studies say about different levels of socioeconomic status. We know that students who fall into the lower socioeconomic status or go to schools that have less finances and resources don't perform well as other students. That is an unfortunate reality that needs to be fixed. We have the same issue with students of color. Minority students have traditionally performed less than their white counterparts. We've made big strides in terms of how men and women have performed in schools, but now we see new gaps that emerge. So those are societal ills that we recognize the school system needs to improve at, but it is never probably an honest answer to say that it is entirely equitable all the time.
The effects of systematic inequality are not exclusive to high schools, as many disadvantaged students confront racial and socioeconomic segregation again in their post-secondary opportunities. This problem has been helped by programs such as affirmative action, which lobbies for race-conscious admissions. According to the National Center for Public Policy and Higher Education, quote, to send a child to a four-year public university in 1999, a family in the lowest income bracket faced a net cost equivalent to 39% of the total family income. By 2008, the net cost had risen to the equivalent of 55% of family income.
What groups do you think are disproportionately targeted by these discriminatory practices?
I'm just going to use my coming from an inner city school background. There's like this small chance where some people say schools are not segregated anymore, but they still are. There's this program that a very less fortunate school down the street from us had, where they could have gone, one kid was at the writing essay, blah, 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 could come to our school, and then he'd go to some type of private schools in like middle, higher up, King of Prussia, Northeast. And that kid who had like no computers at their school came to our school who had Apple computers and cool technology, but old textbooks. And then go to the King of Prussia school where they had Apple laptops to take home and this and that, a lot of things that we couldn't grasp. And then after witnessing these steps, he was brought back to where he was before. So I really thought that was a complete waste of time, saying like this, I guess giving him like a dog treat and like waving it in his face, and like it's like you can't really actually have it and just throwing it in the back. So yeah, I would say no.
Does affirmative action compensate for effects of classism and segregation in schools and post-secondary education?
Obviously, affirmative action is a highly controversial policy. To say that it solves issues is probably not an accurate statement, but its intended goal is to equalize at least the candidate pool to make it look more reflective of society. Unfortunately, policies of affirmative action that are trying to insert people of color and women, typically groups that are underrepresented in certain majors or certain institutions. The effort to do that is entirely ethical and moral. Unfortunately, anytime that you start talking about things like admission and you give credit to someone for something that they didn't earn, that's not merit-based, things like your race or your gender, you are inserting discrimination into a system in which you're trying to eliminate discrimination. And so obviously those policies are highly controversial. There is some studies that talk about its effectiveness to get those underrepresented people through college. But certainly that means that there is someone else at the other end of the equation that has been disregarded or removed into the equation. And that obviously creates inequity.
What groups are disproportionately targeted in these discriminatory practices?
Well, I guess there are kind of two ways to look at discrimination. Obviously, in the last 50 years, we have made tremendous strides in eliminating practices that are overtly racist or discriminatory. Title IX, for example, did wonders for women in creating equity in programs that traditionally served men, not women. We've made tremendous strides since Brown versus Board of Education and the Civil Rights Acts to eliminate policies and programs that use discriminatory practices with housing, for example, or with schooling, for example. But that doesn't mean that there aren't long-standing sexist and racist effects that may date back hundreds of years in this country. So there are obviously certain groups of people that have not narrowed those achievement gaps. And so it's typically where we're going to see that is in socioeconomic status, in racial disparity, and sometimes in gender inequity too.
West Fargo is no stranger to the occurrence of certain groups becoming targets for discrimination. In a study published in the Fargo Forum, it was found that in the West Fargo School District, Black students are 7 times more likely to be suspended from school compared to their white counterparts. Hispanic students are 5 times more likely.
In your opinion, what factors greatly affect education?
Area. The area, because curriculum changes when you go back and forth. We can tell that from the fact that we have SAT on the East Coast and ACT in the Midwest. It's something completely different on the West Coast. And area, definitely what is needed for certain areas and what you're studying in is different. What schools have in equipment is completely different. So I would say just that, because and my school in Philly, the things that other kids had in elementary school and middle school, I did not have. We did not have band. We did not have sports activities. We're lucky enough now that the NFL, the Eagles team, I love my Eagles, have revamped the entire school. That's because they felt like they saw the need. So area has a strong difference, just the way people look at kids and mattering where they are, private school versus public school, just those like stigmas you have within that.
Did the Brown versus Board of Education trial effectively eliminate segregation in schools?
No. To this day, they're still, you can read articles and find out there's still schools that are segregated. and meaning that even when we legally can say, hey, you guys have to have a mixed race, or you can't necessarily say this race has to go there and this race has to go there. Area again has a strong reflecting on it. Again, back to my urban city days, we got to visit the other schools as well, and just to see how the school in the mainly Black and Puerto Rican neighborhoods where I was were worse than the ones literally blocks away from with the more Caucasian groups. Confused me deeply, because I'm like, you guys are literally a bus drive away, and they can't even switch back, or they can't even mix it up. They have a lot of qualities, just again with mostly area. So no, that trial did not really help.
In your opinion, what factors greatly affect education?
Oh man, there's a researcher named John Hattie that has done a ton of research on the effects of different decisions that schools and teachers make and how they affect their learning. So we know a lot of information about what works and what doesn't work. Obviously, there are many factors outside of the school system that have tremendous impact on student performance. We know, for example, that growing up in certain neighborhoods will affect your ability to perform well in schools. Whether we like that or not, those are the realities of the data. We also know that certain things that, regardless of where you live, have an impact. Coming from a single-parent family versus a two-parent family shows that there is an inequity in their performance. A lot of those factors cannot be controlled by the school. What can be controlled by the school, which is most profound, is if you eliminate all those things, those external forces outside the school, what we do have control over is the quality of teacher. And the quality of teacher has a profound impact on student achievement. The higher quality the teacher that we have, the more effective the instruction. And we know that. The problem is that as a country, we have had a really hard time recruiting high quality teachers, retaining high quality teachers, and training high quality teachers. If we could, for example, there's a statistic that came out about a decade ago that said about 3/4 of the nation's teachers graduated in the bottom third of their graduating class in high school. That does not bode well for the profession. We want our best and brightest to be in the classroom teaching our future generations. Largely, that probably has a lot to do with how we perceive the profession. In many countries, for example, there are several Scandinavian countries where your best and brightest become teachers. They are paid well. They are treated with professional respect that sometimes we don't get in this country. And that has a tremendous impact then on how well the students perform. Right now, we haven't made those same kinds of investments in teachers. We haven't trained them properly, probably coming out of college. And even the way we train them once they get into the profession still needs improvement. We know these things. If we can improve the quality of the teacher, even when you come from backgrounds that might be affecting your ability to perform well, if we put a great teacher in front of those classes, we can close the achievement gap drastically.
Every American student under the education system has a dream, but today, those dreams are turning into nightmares. School segregation threatens the futures of millions on a daily basis. The complex truth is that race, education, and school quality are inextricably intertwined. While racial segregation in U.S. schools plummeted between the late 1960s and 1980s, it has steadily increased over time, to the point that schools are about as segregated today as they were 50 years ago. Unfortunately, it seems as though the price of living in our American democracy is prioritizing principles over outcomes. Without real-world results from the promises of equality our nation was built on, it becomes clear that American education is not at all dreamy.
When we allow freedom ring, when we let it ring from every village and every hamlet, from every state and every city, we will be able to speed up that day when all of God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual, free at last, thank God Almighty, we are free at last.